With that, let's get started with today's class. And today's class is an annual one. We are entering one of the most emotion-packed weeks in the calendar. And if Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim are the Jewish people's holiest days, and Pesach, Passover, is the most important holiday as a people, the next two holidays are the most important in Israeli society. They are that high up in importance, which is Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, and Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day. Every year we go through what to expect, and every year for the last few years, I've been adding a new tradition to teach you that is very commonplace in Israeli society. We're going to go through the last 2-year ones as well, and I'm going to teach you something new and I think very poignant for this year. But these are 2 days that even if you grew up in a Jewish community that commemorated either or both, I myself did, having gone to Jewish day school, having gone to Sunday school, always at least having one of them in our repertoire, and certainly in Jewish day school, the Israeli students leading the ceremony for Yom HaZikaron. It's, even if we're familiar with it, it can be very alienating. And it's okay that you don't necessarily feel anything towards either of these days or both these days. And even when you're an Oleh Chadash, Olah Chadasha, you're a new immigrant to Israel under the law of return, it's still sometimes hard to get into these two holidays for a couple of reasons. One, because they happen back to back, which on the one hand is a very Jewish tradition, right? We just talked about, in fact, during the Haggadah, during Pesach, we talked about miagon lesimcha, from sorrow to joy, right? It's the reason why we break a glass during a Jewish wedding to remind ourselves of the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem. And in fact, it's technically incorrect to scream Mazal Tov after that because that's meant to be something sad and sobering during a happy occasion. And so we have a very sad occasion immediately before a very happy occasion, and that we can't disconnect the sacrifice that was made by many in order for this state to not only exist, but to continue existing. And the other is a very simple one, but a profound one that many of us, even if we've been here for a long time, even if we have lots of Israeli relatives, we don't necessarily know someone who died in battle or was murdered in a terrorist attack, which is also commemorated on Yom HaZikaron. And so what grief and bereavement we're trying to be a part of can feel a little forced. So what I hope today is to give you a little bit more insight into how these 2 days work, these 48 hours work, what the mood is right now, and some other insights to perhaps make it a little bit more personal as you go through. Um, as always, I'm going to share vocabulary. You're welcome to screenshot, old school pen and paper, or just sit back and watch. There's also a couple other clips I'm either going to show and or send. At the top of the hour, I'm going to take questions only from the Q&A, and I'm going to talk to you about Wednesday's Cafe Oleh Conversation, which I really hope many of you join, as well as next week's class. So first off, let's start off with the name of this holiday. We call it Yom HaZikaron. That's actually a very truncated version. Just like last week, we commemorated Yom HaShoah. That's actually not the correct name of the holiday. The name of the holiday, if you will, is Yom HaZikaron LaShoah ULiGvura, the day of memory, or the Memorial Day for the Holocaust and for bravery, right? This day, the official name is a long one, as you see here, right? Yom HaZikaron LeChalalei Ma'arachot Yisrael UleNifga'ei Feulot HaIva. Long name, let's unpack it. Yom HaZikaron, right? The day of memory, the Memorial Day. And this is actually a name coming from the Torah. This is one of the many names that Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, has. Yom HaZikaron, right? Where we take stock of what we did in the past year. So it's not just any Yom HaZikaron, it's not the one, meaning Rosh Hashanah, it's Yom HaZikaron LeChalalei Ma'arachot Yisrael. The word halal, if you are not familiar with it, and certainly in the last year and a half, if you're not familiar with it, is a really interesting and important word. Halal, in every other context that we have in modern Hebrew, means space, like outer space, and it means a vacuum. And it also is the word that we refer to soldiers who die in service, whether it's in battle or it's in a training accident. Anything if you're in service to the country and you die or are killed, you are called a halal. Halal is male, by the way. A female who is killed in service is a halala. Halalim is the plural. Halale is the construct case because it is followed by two nouns. So you can think of it in the sense of one of the definitions I saw for halal was absolutely beautiful on one of the free translation services I've told you about, that it is hamelchav ben kochavim. It is that halal is the space or the area in between stars, right? And that halal is the void that is otherwise filled by one of these soldiers who's fallen. I think that's a very, not just poetic, but a very emotional way to think about this term, halal. That's very much a euphemism, but very much what we use. And you'll hear about that today when we talk about the 59 Chatufim, that the 59 remaining captives in Gaza, we refer to them as Chaim v'Chalalim, those who are alive and those who are Chalalim, understood to mean that they are no longer alive. Okay, Ma'achot Yisrael are the military campaigns of Israel, both wars and incursions and skirmishes and all the different kinds in between. Many people don't remember that on this day we also remember those who were murdered in terrorist attacks. That's also included on Memorial Day. Okay. So we talked about halal. Another term you're going to hear is kolban. We use kolban usually when it comes to civilians who are killed and murdered in terrorist attacks. Kolban is a tricky word because kolban means both a victim and it also means a sacrifice. We are by no means in Israeli or Jewish traditions calling those who are victims a sacrifice of anything or to anything, but indeed those are the words that we use. Okay. And before we jump into the details of what to expect, I want to jump a little bit farther back into what words we use during this time, because there's a lot, and there's a lot of really important words that we talk about at this time of year, before we jump into the details of what to expect. The first is one we've already talked about in the context of October 7th. We're going to keep talking about because there's so much unprocessed parts of what's happened to us in the last year and a half as a country, as a society, as a people around the world. And that term is shchol. Shchol was a term we almost only heard on Yom HaZikaron up until a year and a half ago. Shchol, we almost always translated as bereavement. And that is the term that it means, but it also means grief. And shchol is something that all of us, not necessarily people who are mourning someone directly and specifically, all of us have felt since October 7th. Many of us, rather. Shchol is the word for grief. And so we can understand this time of year, and again, in the last year and a half, when you hear about a mishpacha shekula, right? That is a bereaved family or a grieving family, right? A family that's lost a loved one. Okay, and we use this term, and we have a couple terms in Hebrew that in English simply translate as to lose. One of them, which has nothing to do with what we're talking about now, is lafsid. Lafsid does not mean to lose someone or anything in that respect. Lafsid is a verb that we use to lose a game, to lose a bet, or to lose something tangible in that context, right? But it doesn't mean to lose someone. We have another root, Aleph Bet Daled, which in Hebrew translates a lot to loss, as you'll see some of the words that are here. And apologies for the flip here. I'll be sure to switch it back before we send this out. It was lost is avad or avda. Those of you who know Israel's national anthem, Hatikva, Od lo avda tikvatenu. Od lo, not yet. Avda is lost. Tikvatenu, or was lost rather. Tikvatenu, our hope. Okay? Avda, it was lost, as in avduli hamaftechot, right? My keys are missing. Remember when we talked about possession the other week? We talked about what's the subject and what's the object. When you use this verb in the context of avad, avda, or avdu, we're talking about the thing that was lost, not the person who did the losing. Okay, so avduli maftechot. My keys are missing. versus ibda. Ibda, that form of the verb means she lost, as in ibadati et hamaftechot. I lost my keys. Right now, the subject is the keys, is me because I lost the keys. In the previous one of Duli Amaftechot, it's the keys that are at the center. Okay? Halach leibud, he got lost. This is how we say you get lost in Hebrew. Not to get lost like to get away from me, but to literally you lose your direction. Or you get lost in a supermarket. You get lost trying to get somewhere. Okay? That's the expression hu halach leibud, he halcha leibud, and so forth. The expression ibed et ha'eshtonot. This is, I translate it here as he lost his senses. This is like he lost his marbles. He's lost his mind. It's not just senses. It's really he lost his mind. It's not he's gone crazy. It's he's lost his composition. Another way to think about it. And finally, in this same root that gives us words for loss. Oh wait, excuse me. We have a couple more. Avud is lost or hopeless as an adjective. Ovdan is lost as a noun. And lehitabed, to lose oneself, is the way we say in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, to commit suicide. Okay. At the same time, we're talking about loss because that is what this Yom HaZikaron is about, or remembering those who are no longer with us. The root from that word zikaron also gives us important words that we use throughout the year. So zayin chaf resh, the shoresh in zikaron, gives us a couple different verbs. And we've talked about these verbs before. It's always a good time to remind you about these. Okay. The first is liskol, the one that you, when you're learning Hebrew in Ulpan or in day school or university or yeshiva, is usually the first one you learn, right? And we learn this as meaning to remember. And it's true. Liskol does mean to remember. But practically, and this is always important, we talk about here at Cafe Oleh, what it says on the books or in your dictionary and how it's actually used. The verb liskol is only used in the present and future tenses. You're not going to hear, much less use this verb in the past tense. If you want to say, I remembered something, you're going to use our next verb, lehizacher. Lehizacher literally means to be remembered. It's the passive form of the verb liskol, but in everyday speech, we use this to mean I recalled something, both in the present and the past tense. So if I want to say, I remembered that we've met. Niskalti b'zeh shenifgashnu. Okay, that's how you're going to use this verb as the past tense of I remembered, as in I'm reminded of, I recalled, and so forth. And then finally, the causative form, to cause someone or something to remember, is to remind, right? Something that forces you to remember something is a reminder in your phone, for example. That verb is lahazkir. Okay. And these verbs in turn give us all sorts of other words. So for example, zikaron, we just talked about, is not just memory like Yom HaZikaron, it's also your own memory, right? The memory we all have. Azkara, azkara is the word that we use in modern Hebrew for the Yiddish yahrzeit. Azkara is a memorial, both a day and also a ceremony. Tizkoret is a reminder. Mazkeret, something that reminds you of something that you've been to or somewhere that you've seen, a souvenir. Okay? And finally, right, remember that I said to cause you to remember something, to remind. That's also where we get the word for secretary in Hebrew, right? The person who's in charge of reminding you about something, the person who's in charge of causing you to remember you have an appointment or you have a meeting or you need to do this or that. Mazkir, male, mazkira, female, and a mazkirut is a secretariat. Okay. Now, just as deep and intense those words are, so too do we immediately flip over, right? Starting tomorrow night is the beginning of Yom HaZikaron. Exactly 24 hours after that, we start Yom HaAtzmaut, the happiest day of the year, or what should be the happiest day of the year. And then we have words that have to do with happiness, right? Sin, mem, chet have to do with happiness. Simcha, In modern Hebrew, happiness. Lismoach is to become happy. And I've taught you this expression many times. Esmach she. I'd be happy for you to do something, or I'd love for you to do something, or I'd love for something to happen. Esmach she. It's also a great way, instead of always saying ken, yes to an answer, you can say esmach. I would love that. Okay, it just sounds nice, just like it does in English. Lismoach is to become happy, and lisameach is to make someone happy. Anyone who's been to a chatuna, a wedding, a Jewish wedding or an Israeli wedding, and you do the um, Sheva Brachot, the seven blessings, you know the one that's about lisameach, right? To make the bride and groom happy. Lisameach is that verb. Toda shesimachta oti. Thanks for cheering me up, right? To cause me to become happy. Okay, so a lot of emotions going on in this week, a lot of emotions in those particular 48 days. Let's go through what to expect, and then a very important addition to what we talk about each year. So first off, it begins officially tomorrow night, exactly, almost exactly 24 hours from now, 24 hours minus 22 minutes, because it's now 8:22 here in Israel. The Yom HaZikaron begins at 8 p.m. to this year on Tuesday night, in which a Sfirat Zikaron or a Sfirat Dumia will sound. Okay, that is a memorial siren, which is noted as its one flat note. Okay, one flat note that will sound for 1 minute tomorrow night at 8 o'clock and 2 minutes Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. At that time in Israel, the whole nation, as many people, most people, the vast majority of people, stand still wherever they are. So some people choose to be out on the street to watch other people and themselves stop in where they are, stop in place. Cars will stop in place, buses will stop in place, everything will stop in place at those two moments, Tuesday night at 8, Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Okay, and then we'll resume. Tomorrow's 1 minute. Wednesday mornings is 2 minutes long. And like I said, it's Sfirat Zikaron or Dumia is a flat line, and that is different than Sfirat Azaka, unfortunately, that we are all familiar with in the last year and a half. If you weren't already, that is the up and down siren that indicates warning, seek shelter because there's an imminent attack coming. Okay, that's the difference. Sfirat Zikaron Dumia, the one you're going to hear during, hopefully the only two you will hear during Yom HaZikaron, is a flat one versus the up and down one. If you hear the up and down one, at any moment, you go seek shelter. Even if it happens in the moment that we're supposed to stop during the memorial siren, you go seek shelter immediately. Okay? The word tekis. Tekis is a really important word any time of year. In Israel and Israeli culture, we memorialize a lot of things through tkasim. That's the plural. Ceremonies. We create ceremonies throughout the years that have become important parts of how we do things. So, for example, on Tuesday, the official tekes that starts Yom HaZikaron is in the front of the kotel, where various dignitaries will will have certain speeches, certain memorial prayers will be said, and the memorial torch will be lit. And that's the first of many tkasim that will happen in that 48-hour period, right? More will happen at 11 a.m. Wednesday morning, for example. The official one in Har Herzl, Israel's National Military Cemetery, will take place on Wednesday night, and we'll talk about that one in a little bit, is the ceremony that is the transition between Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, and many other tkasim will take place throughout the year. Okay. Um, One of the other things that happens this time of year, that many people, instead of actually sharing it, share a meme from the hit TV show The West Wing, where they refer to it, but they don't actually share the actual thing they're talking about. In Hebrew, we call Shidur Shemot Hanoflim. Shidur is a broadcast, Shemot, names, Hanoflim, of the fallen. And it's a tradition on Channel 11, which formerly was Israel's one and only TV station, Channel 1, to for the duration of Yom HaZikaron, and now it actually starts before the official start at 8 p.m. to broadcast every single person who has fallen in battle or in a terror attack since 1862, which is the moment that the Jews started living outside of the walls of the walls of the old city of Jerusalem and created their own community. And since then, that's the start of counting. Everyone who has fallen since. Everyone gets a certain amount of seconds. And on the screen is listed a picture, if there is one, their name, when they fell, the Hebrew and civil date. Okay, and if they fell while in service, the insignia of whatever service they were in, military, police, and so forth, will be on the screen as well. In the background will be what we call Shirei Eretz Israel. Shirei Eretz Israel is literally the songs of the land of Israel. And these are very patriotic songs. They're very nostalgic. They're very emotional songs that are typically very somber in tempo and tone, sometimes in meaning as well. They're usually achingly beautiful lyrics. And this is the only music that's played, just as if you listened to music during Yom HaShoah last week. So too on Yom HaZikaron, this is the only music you'll hear. People often joke, because Israelis are known for their dark humor, of saying how beautiful the music is this time of year, and how beautiful the music is anytime something bad happens, because it's these very nostalgic songs you really only hear a few times a year, or if you're really into it, obviously on Spotify, you can always hear them. For those of you, just to give a little bit more context, the Shidul Shemot HaNoflim, first off, when the link goes live tomorrow, I'll be sure to send it out so you can follow along. It's usually on YouTube as well as on Channel 11's website. There was also, if you were here in Israel or you were watching Israeli news from abroad at the beginning of the war, on October 7th, those first few days, and I think it was actually even up until the first few weeks, at the beginning of each hour, they would do the Shidul Shemot HaNoflim of the names that had been cleared for release since October 7th. It wouldn't be all of them. It would be each day the new collection of names that have been allowed to be distributed for people. And they would do a very similar Shidul broadcast, just as you're going to see for 24 hours. It's actually 26, 27 hours on TV. Okay. Another very common thing in both good times and bad in Israel, and we've talked about this a lot in the past, how important music is in Israeli culture and Israeli society and Israeli mentality. That we use music a lot, just as we use music in other societies and certainly in Jewish tradition. And just as we sing and we have certain songs that we hear in good times and for holidays, we have the songs we sing when we're sad and we're mourning. And there's a tradition, not just here in Tel Aviv, but throughout the country, of having Shira Betzibur. Shira Betzibur literally means singing in public. And it's a tradition, excuse me, that goes back to the early days of the kibbutzim, where at the end of a long day, you would sit around in a circle around a campfire and you would create and sing new songs to create a new culture and a sense of camaraderie that everyone knows the lyrics to these songs. Right? So there's a tradition that started here in Tel Aviv, but it's also found in other cities throughout, where you sing some of these Shirei Eretz Israel together, usually led by a famous singer who sings the songs. Everyone knows them, and interspersed are stories of soldiers who have fallen and also victims of terror. Traditionally in Tel Aviv, it takes place in Kikar Rabin, but as they're still building the light rail that goes right under it, it has been moved to Park Yalkon, and it's also broadcast live on TV. On Wednesday day, many have the tradition, or at least those who are directly mourning someone, will go to a Beit Kvarot, or it's also known as a Beit Almin. Beit Kvarot is a cemetery. It's literally a house of graves. Beit Almin is Aramaic. It is not Hebrew, and it means the house of eternity, right? Just as Halal, you can think of as a euphemism for someone who's passed away in service. Beit Almin, the house of eternity, instead of directly acknowledging death, the house of eternity, where our loved ones are. Right? There are many Bate Almin throughout the country, as well as besides Har Herzl, which is the main military cemetery, and according to the state of Israel, all fallen soldiers are entitled to be buried there. But we also have regional military cemeteries, which are called Beit Almin Tzva'i. Tzva'i from the word tzava, military. Okay, for people who want to be closer to their loved ones and can choose to be buried in one of these military regional cemeteries. We have one here in Tel Aviv, for example, that's just on the other side of the Ayalon from Azrieli Center, called Nachalat Yitzchak. There's many others throughout the country. And one tradition that was shared to me by a former Nefesh B'Nefesh employee that I think is really important to share, we shared this a couple of years ago, is the concept of Netzer Acharon. Netzer is a offshoot. Think of it as a small branch in family tree terms. It's called a scion, not Zion like Zionism, but scion. And the idea is just like a tree has branches that come out, so too does a family tree. But a Netzer Acharon is the last offshoot. And as it says here on the left-hand side, it refers to a survivor of the Holocaust, of the Shoah, a Nitzol Shoah, right? And this is also a bridge between last week's Yom HaShoah and this week's Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, mind you. Netzer Acharon is someone who survived the Holocaust. His or her immediate family did not, so they were the only ones who survived. They made Aliyah and then died in battle in Israel without having their own family, without starting their own family and having any children. Thus, they are literally the last branch of their family. Netzer Acharon. In Israel, there are 158 people who are part of this community called Netzer Acharon. And what I want to show you now, and I'll send you this link as well, is there's a website called Yizkol. Yizkol means will remember. He will remember. And this is the official memorial site of the State of Israel, where it lists all those who have fallen in battle since before Israel's existence even. And you can look up not only the story of each and every one of these people, you can also find where they're buried. So this is the website that lists all 168 of these Netzer, this community of Netzer Acharon. The very last one who passed away was in 1958. Okay, the very last one. And you can see in each of these, right, with each of these names, you can see what their military rank was. In this case, Samal, his name, who he was, whose his parents were, when he fell, meaning he died, this case, he died on Kaf Aleph Be'av Tashiach, the 6th of August, 1958, and where he's buried. Makom Menuchato, the place of his resting. Beit Almin, cemetery, is the name, Hatzva'i, Kiryat Shaul. So in the Kiryat Shaul military cemetery is where you can find him. And if you click on any of these, you get a link to their complete bio. And it's a beautiful tribute. You get even someone, again, remember, this is a Netzer Acharon, someone who has no living relatives. No one of this family survived after this person passed away. And look how deep and in depth we know about them. And you can find out from this not only where they're buried, but a very powerful tradition on Yom HaZikaron is as families are gathering in cemeteries to mourn their family dead, many take it upon themselves, myself included, to visit the graves of a Netzer Acharon because they don't have someone who can mourn over them anymore. And you'll often see that many other people did the same thing. You'll see that youth movement members went to the graves of a Netzer Acharon to convey their respects, to lay down a rock, which is the tradition Jewish, the Jewish custom, or flowers or notes. I myself go to one in Nachalat Yitzchak, which is not far away from here. And I always come there and there's already people who've been there. It's a beautiful tribute. And I think, frankly, as Olim, whether we move here or not with family, to understand, and no matter how many family members we have abroad, this connection with people who made one of the biggest sacrifices in their lives. They made Aliyah and they gave up their lives defending what they had recently only adopted. Okay, so this is a wonderful tradition. Like I said, I'll send you that link. to see them. There's also a great YouTube video that explains more about the Netzer Acharon and the tradition of putting a stone on a grave. It's all in Hebrew. You're welcome all to try it. It's probably more appropriate for those at a more advanced level, but I'll send it all to you because it's a very touching tribute to the Netzer Acharon. And another thing you'll see on Tuesday night and Wednesday are stickers of a red flower, and that red flower is called Dam HaMaccabim. The name of it in English is often known as the everlasting flower. That's what it's called. And it's a flower that, according to tradition, grows on every spot that was shed by the Maccabees, the Maccabim. And thus it's called Dam HaMaccabim, the blood of the Maccabees. And it looks like little round red dots in a field. It's recently, there's a nonprofit that's recently acquired them to be grown and sold as, as a donation to wounded soldiers. Unfortunately, this year, because of the war, they haven't been able to work on it, but it's a future project because otherwise this is a protected flower. That's why you'll see people with a sticker. It says at the top, Yizkor, short for Yizkor Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel remembers, and the flower itself. Okay. Very similar, as I wrote here, to the poppy worn by many in the Commonwealth on Memorial Day. Okay. I alluded to this before. It's the ceremony that breaks Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, which takes place at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. It's the reason why our Cafe Oleh conversation will take place at 9 p.m. I'll remind you in just a few minutes about that. Okay. And this is, in normal years, this is one of the most meaningful, emotional, unique, campiest, kitschiest things you'll ever see in Israeli society. This is a truly Israeli ceremony, tekes, but that's firmly ingrained in Jewish tradition, where we have a variety of things that we do to make this transition, similar to Havdalah. Those of you who are familiar with tradition, marking the passage between Shabbat and the start of the new week. So too do we have this ceremony to mark the passage between our sadness moving into our happiness, into having our own state. Okay. One of the highlights of this is that we have the actual event, Hadlakat HaMesuot. Lehadlik is to light, right? It's also to turn on a switch, to turn on electrical current. But Mesu'ah is a torch. And one of the highlights of this ceremony is that 12 Israeli citizens, increasingly also one Jew from a diaspora community, are invited to light one of these 12 torches that symbolize the 12 tribes of Israel in acknowledgement of their ongoing contribution to the welfare and the glory of the state of Israel. And so they will be nominated weeks and months in advance. They'll give a speech in which they say who their name is, and they commit lighting this candle to and the torch to, and they talk about what they have done. And they march out onto the main stage in Har Herzl, in front of Herzl's grave, to the tune Anu Nosim Lapidim. We actually talked about this song last year in the context not just of Yom HaAtzmaut, but also Hanukkah. This was originally a Hanukkah song penned in 1930 that became such a big hit that it's because it's a military march that we play this also on Yom HaAtzmaut. It's a very patriotic song. It's a very, in some ways, questionable choice and controversial. I referred to our previous classes about this, but it's a really powerful song as well. And so they march out to the tune of the song. Each of them does their speech. And at the end of their speech, they'll say, Tiferet Medinat Israel. Think of it as a toast, l'chaim, right? But instead of saying to life, I'm committing myself in everything I just did and lighting of this torch, Tiferet Medinat Israel, Tiferet Medinat Israel, to the splendor, to the glory of the state of Israel. They light their torch, they move on to the next person. So 12 torches, 12 tribes of Israel. Afterwards, there's a military march to the tune of Tzahal Tzoed. Tzoed means march in Hebrew, and this is the official marching tune of IDF. You'll recognize it immediately if you've been in Israel, if you listen to Galei Tzahal, the army radio broadcasts begin in the morning. It's a very well-known tune. And this year, like the last 2 years, we will not be celebrating with Zikukim or Zikukei Dinol. Either term in Hebrew means fireworks. We will not be celebrating with them again. I believe they'll have what we call silent fireworks, which are thought of, you can think of more as um, a light show that goes up in the air. But because of the war, as well as the understanding of how many people are suffering from PTSD, but also the immediate fear of what a loud flash and bang looks like in the sky, there will be no fireworks shows, not only at the main ceremony, but in most municipalities in Israel. Not all of them, but the vast majority will not be having a fireworks display to start Yom HaAtzmaut. Yom HaAtzmaut, Atzmaut means independence. That's the name of the holiday. It's not a long name like Yom HaZikaron. It's simply Yom HaAtzmaut. A classic thing that'll happen even this year, even as we are still at war, we are still mourning, we are still in Shchol, is a Mesibat Rachov. Mesiba, party, Rachov, street party. Mesibat Rachov. In many places you'll have this, impromptu as well as planned. Excuse me. A classic tradition in Israel this time of year, you also saw this on Purim, but especially on Yom HaAtzmaut, is to spray each other with sheleg. Sheleg is soap or foam in a can, in a pressurized aerosol can. You'll see it on sale in many places. Usually it's kids who are spraying each other. Some kids get a little too rowdy and just spray passersby. If you are afraid of that, if you don't want to be sprayed by it, it's non-toxic, but just don't populate anywhere Wednesday night in Israel that's particularly packed or central place, because many kids will be out celebrating with that. Some other traditional things that happen on the day of this year, Thursday day, is Chidona Tanakh. Chidona Tanakh is the International Bible Contest for youth that takes place every year. There is always a large contingent of Jewish students from abroad, and they talk about there's several different rounds that take place. It's shown live on TV. The questions get increasingly harder, and they talk about what school they came from. But I can already give you a spoiler, folks. The Israeli always wins. There's obviously multiple Israeli participants, but the Israeli always wins. An Israeli cannot not win on Yom HaAtzmaut. But Jewish students from around the world also participate. It's considered a very prestigious thing. You'll hear it if you watch it live on TV. Also on Channel 11, the questions are quite hard. Also, this time of year is when we give Pras Yisrael. Pras Yisrael, the Israel Prize, is the highest civilian prize you can give in Israel. It's given out annually to a selection of Israeli citizens for their contributions to society. And of course, the national pastime that officially starts this time of year, but frankly, you've seen it already out, is mangal or alaish. Mangal is a Turkish term that refers to that aluminum rectangular type of grill on legs. But we also use that as a catch-all term for barbecue. Al-Haesh, on the fire, is the more immediate way that we say in general barbecue. Okay? Both are national pastimes. Many people will be doing that on Thursday. And another pastime on that day is to show your ability to linafnef. Linafnef is a little bit of an onomatopoeia. It's this, right? It's fanning the flames, not fanning the flames in a figurative sense, a literal fanning the flames, whether it's a little plastic fan or sometimes a piece of cardboard, but everyone has their own trick of how do we get the coals to light faster. Okay. Putting that all aside, though, now that I've taken you through the day, and in our little time we have left before I want to answer questions and talk about both Wednesday's class and next week's class, I want to talk to you about a very important term. So if a few years ago I taught you about the Netzer Acharon or about the song Anu Nosim Lapidim, there's a very important term in Israeli society that we can't actually translate into English. There is no word in English that translates to it. And the adjective is mamlachti, and the noun is Mamlachtiyut. Some of you probably have already heard this term. If you have children or grandchildren in Israel, or you're looking into the school system in Israel, you know that the public school system is called Mamlachti, and the public religious school system is Mamlachti Dati. And you'd be right. But what does this word mean? So immediately when I say mamlachti, you probably can see some words in it that you already know, right? Some of you know the word mem lamed kaf, melech, king, or malka, or malkat, the queen of something, right? Some of you know the word malchut, kingship. Some of you know the word melucha, and some of you, particularly those of you on the east side of the Atlantic, know the word mamlacha. Mamlacha means kingdom, right? And normally when we hear the term mamlacha, we're thinking about a kingdom, right? The official term for the UK in Hebrew, for example, ha-mamlacha ha-meuchedet, the United Kingdom. But that's not what mamlachti and mamlachtiyut means. Mamlachti and mamlachtiyut is a term that was coined by David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, in trying to take everything that was being built um, through the Zionist movement and through the reestablishment of infrastructure, Jewish infrastructure in the land of Israel, right? Because before 1948, Zionist movements, and there were many of them, were busy building what became the state, infrastructure, jobs, companies, labor unions, health and welfare organizations, the Jewish Agency, which became the trappings of the government, and so forth, right? Mamlachti was a post 1948 reality. Okay, we've built all these things, but we all built these things based on our own ideology. Whether you are left or center of left, whether you are a socialist or a communist or a revisionist or religious or secular, we all had our own thing. Before 1948, there were multiple schooling systems based on your ideology, right? Nowadays, most of us don't know the difference between Mapai and Mapam, and Gachal and Machal, and Mizrahi and Agudat Yisrael, unless we really know a lot of Israeli society, because we don't need to. We've had the process of Mamlachtiyut, right? That's the process of how we took all those different ideologies that have been with us, not just during the Zionist movement, but for all the years before it, when we were trying to figure out as a people, how do we deal with this conception of the modern world? Where do we fit into it? Maybe we don't fit into it unless we have our own state. And we dealt with it in so many different ways that we created further categories of ourselves within the Jewish world. And Mamlachtiyut is the process of how do we bring it all together. In practical terms, that meant disbanding the Haganah and the Palmach and creating Tzahal, Tzva Haganah Israel. It was no longer a partisan military organization that belonged to one movement or another. No more Palmach and Haganah, no more Irgun, no more Lehi, no more Etzel, no more nothing. It was only Tzva Haganah Israel. No more things that only belong to certain things and other people. So, for example, Kupot Cholim, right? Our universal health care was built on this principle that it was no longer just the purview of the Labor Trade Federation. You no longer had to be a member of it in order to get access to healthcare. Or the schooling system. Instead of having all these different schooling systems, we had one public track system, regular and dati. Okay? Mamlachtiyut is the process of taking all of our differences, still holding on to our own different ideas and our own different beliefs, but finding a common ground that we can all work together. And it's the process of creating a state. Why do I bring this up? Number one, because this is a really important term. We still don't have an English word that defines it because it's a very Israeli thing. But I think especially after everything we've experienced in the last year and a half, the last 3 years, in general, in our soon-to-be 77 years of existence and before that, this is a process that's still ongoing. If Zionism was the realization of us coming back to our own land to be our own free people and to rule ourselves, Mamlachtiyut is the day after. Okay, what do we do with that freedom? How do we keep building? How do we keep building despite our differences? And there are plenty of differences in all of us. And we're not saying throw out the differences, is how do we keep building in spite of them or because of them? And I think that's a really important term in general to have. That's still a very important vision of what there is to do. And that if Zionism has sort of gotten blurred by many people, not just non-Jewish, not just our detractors, we can hold on to this mamlachtiyut. What do we do this day after? Yom HaAtzmaut is as much a happy day as it's often in Israeli society, and you'll see this because of the power of Yom HaZikaron. It becomes a day of reflection. So we say in Hebrew, cheshbon nefesh. We think a lot about what we've done in the past year and what we can continue to do as a collective to better ourselves. Mamlachtiyut is that notion of how do we better ourselves? How do we keep working and being part as one nation together, despite our differences? With that, I'm going to stop and answer questions, but first, before that, again, toda rabah to the now 241 of you who are on this call. Again, you are part of the world's biggest regularly scheduled Hebrew class. This doesn't exist anywhere else. So toda rabah, thank you all for joining. Number two, the spreadsheet, the links I promised, and some other information will be sent out in the next day. So stay tuned both in your email as well as on YouTube. Wednesday's class will be taking everything we just went through and expanding upon that notion of Mamlachtiyut, and we're going to talk about questions about Zionism. Lama alitem arza? Why did you make aliyah? Lama atem choshvim al aliyah? Why do you think about making aliyah? Right? What things, and talk about a lot of things of your connection to the land, to the state, to the people of Israel. We're going to be doing that on Wednesday. It's a really important class, especially for those of you, and you will get this question if you haven't before. Why did you make aliyah? We're going to practice answering that along with a lot of other questions that have to do with independence, freedom, Zionism on Wednesday. I highly recommend all of you to join us for that. You will get a prompt of the questions that we're going to use for conversation starters within 24 hours of Wednesday's class, which will begin at 9 p.m. We normally start at 8 this week because of the start of Yom HaAtzmaut. We'll start at 9 p.m. So I hope you can all join us on that, 9 p.m. Israel time, of course. Next week's class, we are going to be talking about media literacy, always an important topic where we're going to pick a recent article in the news and talk about it regardless of what level you are, to emphasize the importance not just of reading, following the news in Hebrew, but understanding even at a basic level, you can follow along with the news. With that, let me answer some questions in the Q&A with the time we have left. What time is the Tekes at Har Herzl on Wednesday? If you're referring to the one during Yom HaZikaron, it's at 11 a.m. That memorial siren starts that one. And then the one in the evening starts at either 7 or 8 p.m. I forget. Okay. When do they play the Land of Israel songs and on which station? Every radio station will be playing them starting, let's say, tomorrow afternoon. Also very important, folks. Things close in the next 48 hours. And I'm sorry I didn't talk about that sooner. Let me close that for a second. Businesses will start closing tomorrow as early as 3 p.m. Everything is shut Tuesday night, meaning the start of Yom HaZikaron this year. That's always the case every year. So if you don't have groceries, now is the time to buy them up until, let's say, 3 o'clock tomorrow. Some places will shut as late as 6 or 7 p.m., but by law, places of entertainment are shut, including commerce. So keep that in mind. Restaurants will be closed. Many supermarkets will close out of respect. So if you do need to do grocery shopping, please do so soon. On Wednesday, many of them will reopen and again will shut early, anywhere from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. In advance of Yom HaAtzmaut. On Yom HaAtzmaut itself, on Thursday, many businesses are closed. That's the one civil day of the year, that non-religious day of the year, that many businesses are closed. So pay attention if there's places you are looking to travel to or go to. They may be closed on Thursday. Okay, let me get back to the Q&A. So when do they play the Land of Israel songs? They're going to start playing them tomorrow as we get into, Yom HaZikaron. You can also look up, by the way, on Spotify. If you can't hear these live, you can always type into Spotify Shirei Eretz Yisrael, and there are many playlists there with the classic songs on there. But all you have to do is tune into any of the major radio stations in Israel, be it Reshet Gimel, which only plays Israeli music, or Galgalatz, the classic one that's part of the army. They will all be playing Shirei Eretz Yisrael, as will all the other private radio stations. Okay? How is the traffic to come into Jerusalem and Jerusalem on Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut? Do not plan to drive into anywhere near Yom HaHerzl on Wednesday morning. It will be packed. In fact, almost all cemeteries in Israel will be packed in terms of traffic. For example, the military cemetery right next to Tel Aviv, Nachalat Yitzchak, I walked to, not just because it's nearby, but the traffic around it is horrendous on that day. Everyone's trying to get there. Make sure that you have other ways to get there, but try not to use a private car. Use a bus, walk. Public transportation will be operable, but give yourself extra time to get to any of these. But also know how Herzl will be packed. So you can also watch that ceremony live on TV. Okay. Can Mamlachtiyut be translated as statehood? Yes and no. Um, yes and no. Um, it's not quite statehood because listen to how I just described it, right? That's more than just statehood. Statehood is, yes, it's all the trappings of a state, but Mamlachtiyut in an Israeli context is how do we bridge all the things that came before and still divide us to create statehood? It's more that than just the process of just the action of statehood. Okay. One last question. Sorry, we have a few. Sorry, just a second. There's another Cafe Oleh playlist on YouTube of 128 videos, which seems to be older than the place 165. Great point. If you look at who created that, that was a private user. So thank you, whoever that private user was. But Nefesh B'Nefesh has the official full list of all of our previous videos. Great question. How do you greet someone during this time? So in normal years, we would say Chag Atzmaut Sameach. May you have a happy Yom HaAtzmaut, or simply Chag Sameach. When it comes to that, we usually only start saying that halfway through Yom HaZikaron. You wouldn't say it right now, right? You don't really greet anyone in a specific way for Yom HaAtzmaut. And I got to be honest, many people are having a hard time saying Chag Sameach this year as well, for understandable reasons. So people may have a hard time expressing that. They may say Sheyeh Chag Sameach, that it may be a happy holiday, or other iterations, but there is no official way to other than saying Chag Atzmaut Sameach to greet someone ahead of Yom HaAtzmaut. Ahead of Yom HaZikaron, we don't really greet people in any way, just as you don't greet someone who's mourning in a specific way, nor do we say any of the traditional things that we say in Jewish tradition of someone who's mourning. Will the buses and light rail run on Wednesday and Thursday? Yes, they will. The schedule might be truncated. You should look at not just Google Maps, but any of the apps where you can pay on public transport, like Hop On or Move It, for a more updated schedule. Okay. Buses and light rail will run as usual throughout the day. Because people are still getting to ceremonies, they're still trying to get places. But they may be on a truncated schedule, so they may not be as frequent as possible, as usual, rather.